If you're a professional brewer, you know how frustrating it can be when you go to place a yeast order and what you're looking for is out of stock. Well, Imperial Yeast is here to help by guaranteeing that commercial orders up to 20 liters of 10, yes, 10 of their most popular strains will ship free if they're not in stock when you place your order. Some of these strains include A38 Juice for those hazy IPAs, A07 Flagship, a classic in clean American styles, L13 Global, which is said to be one of the world's most popular lager strains, A44 Viking for your warm fermented beers, and so many more. So in addition to pitching right with the highest quality yeast on the market, they're promising that yeast will be ready when you need it or shipping is on them. Whether you're a pro or a home brewer, if you haven't tried Imperial Yeast in your brewery, it's time to up your game. You can check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and place your commercial orders at imperialyeast.com. The state of Kentucky is known for a few things. Fried chicken, for example, or something I tend to enjoy a bit more than that, bourbon. Located in the southern part of the United States, Kentuckians, at least those who enjoy imbibing, are an innovative bunch. In addition to backwoods moonshining operations, a specific style of beer was created in this region, one that the U.S. can claim wholly as its own, but it's rarely talked about or even brewed these days. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Shoddy, and joining me on this episode to talk about the very unique style known as Kentucky Common is contributor Steve Thanos.
I'm really excited about talking about Kentucky Common with you. It is one of those styles that has sort of been forgotten about. So I really do want to shed some light on it and maybe get some people interested in brewing some more Kentucky Commons.
Absolutely. A little disclaimer now. I'm not a fan of trying to sound smarter or more experienced than I really am, which is why I want to get this out there right now, that I've never actually brewed a Kentucky Common. I've been fortunate enough to have sampled a handful of them, every single one of which was made by homebrewers who gave them to me. I've never had a commercial example, at least that I can recall. Steve, if I'm not mistaken, you're in the same boat.
I've had one commercial example from Fall City Brewing Company out in Louisville, Kentucky. Wonderful addition to the craft field of beers. It was a really well done beer. Then I believe a friend of mine from my brew club actually brewed one as well. So I'm sort of in your camp with the inexperience. I've never brewed one myself.
Yeah. I think it's only fair to be open about this with our listeners.
For sure.
Contributor Mike Neville is the one who brewed the short and shoddy Kentucky Common that we're going to be talking about later on in this episode. And all of the other info that we share is based on our experiences drinking and just researching this old school American style. All right, if you like what we're up to and you want us to keep doing it, please consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy. This is our number one source of support. By committing to a small monthly pledge over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. Coming up later this week, the July 2023 guest is one of the most well-known voices in brewing, author of Brewing Classic Styles, and host of the awesome Brew Strong podcast on the Brewing Network, the one and only Jamil Zainasheff. In addition to everything he's done for homebrewing, Jamil founded Heretic Brewing back in 2010 and spent the better part of the last decade running it. And while he's no longer with the company, he's got a ton of experience brewing on the commercial scale. If you want to be a part of this awesome session, you have to make your pledge at patreon.com/Brewlosophy no later than Friday, July 28th, 2023, as Jamil's going to be taking questions that Saturday, the 29th. All past sessions are stored on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so patrons can go back and watch them whenever they like. Another really easy way to help us out is by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. A few people have reached out to ask what affiliate links we have, so rather than repeating the web address, I'll just tell you our main accounts are with More Beer, Great Fermentations, Brewers Hardware, The Brew Bag, ThermoWorks, and that gigantic online retailer who happens to be named after the Amazon River. All of those links can be bookmarked so that future purchases continue to help us out without you even noticing. Thanks to everybody who has been taking the time to use those links. It's a huge help. And finally, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we'd appreciate that as well. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've had the opportunity to brew on both their 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit, efficient, easy to use, use with a relatively small footprint, you're not going to be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run an amazing YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know Brewlosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Shane Dirks wrote in after listening to episode 275, where we discussed our views on beer glassware. Shane said, in addition to being a relatively new beer nerd, I'm a lifelong huge coffee nerd. For the last few years, I've been using Avensi glasses for my morning coffee. He says he got in on the Kickstarter and the prices have gone up a bit since that time. These glasses come in 3 shapes, each of which is designed to purportedly bring out different aspects of the coffee. While I don't necessarily notice the aroma amplifying properties that they claim, I definitely, anecdotally he says, notice how the glasses enhance different flavors. Their claim is that the shape of the lip of the glass concentrates and directs the flow of the coffee to different portions of the tongue, resulting in different tastes being emphasized. Over the years, I've had numerous friends and family cup the same coffee from all 3 designs, and while they weren't blind to the fact that the glasses were different, they were blind to what the intended effect of each glass was. So far, everyone who has tried the glasses has reported flavor enhancements in line with what is advertised. Not definitive, but definitely interesting. Keep up the great work, and thanks for getting me into brewing. Well, thank you for the feedback, Shane. Steve, what do you think about these glasses and the idea that the lip will direct the coffee and ostensibly beer to different parts of the tongue, and you'll get a different experience because of that? I
mean, I'm not against the idea. I'm just like the first thing that popped in my head, and kind of I thank Brewlosophy for the knowledge of how our minds work with biases and whatnot, or biases. How were the tasters? Were they given information about these glasses prior to tasting, and was the tasting? Kind of when we do triangles, we tell people not to talk, right?
Yeah.
As to not bias the other people that are around you. So I really would have to wonder how much communication was there, both on the front end and during the tastings. Not to say that I discredit this idea, because I'm a big coffee nerd myself. So anything to enhance the enjoyment of coffee, I'm all for. So I guess I just have a bit of a skepticism, but still, intrigued by it.
Yeah, I think your skepticism is wholly healthy, Steve, and I'm right there with you. This is one of those topics that I feel a bit unnecessarily contentious. People want to believe that the products we spend money on actually do what is claimed. You've got companies who make a truly beautiful product. Shane actually sent me a link to those coffee glasses, and they look gorgeous. I mean, they're really nice. But they have this claim to have, quote, scientific evidence or whatever, proving that they make a difference. My issue with that, besides questioning, the actual, science there, and I put that in quotes, is that testing the impact of different glasses or what those glasses have on aroma and flavor is extremely difficult to do without participants knowing the glasses are different. Kind of like you were saying, Steve, it's the reason we haven't done, or that we're still kind of trying to figure out the best way to do some Brewlosophy experiments on glassware. How does one get truly blind data on this? You have to, unless you are sitting there and actually pouring the drink into a person's mouth, which poses all of its, its own issues. How do you get blind data? I'm certainly not saying that what you, Shane, and your friends perceived was false. I'm just highly skeptical, like you, Steve, because of how incredibly powerful bias is, and that bias of expectation. We expect there to be a difference. There's this cognitive dissonance when we invest into something. We expect something to happen, there to be something good comes from that, and we're all massively biased. That is not a dig. It just is what it is. So ultimately, if you like the glasses, if you think they look pretty, and then you also do think that it has an impact and you don't mind spending the money on them, then by all means, you do your thing, regardless of my cynicism. So thank you for reaching out, Shane. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thebrewlosophy show. Host Martin Keene has been doing a truly incredible job over there, which is evidenced by the fact that we're already over 16,000 subscribers in barely 3 months' time. And we would love for you to be a subscriber as well. When we return from this break, the focus will be on Kentucky Common. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD. That's BRUPOD at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. It's a little weird to me that of all of the existing beer styles from Pilsner to Stout, only a handful are uniquely indigenous to the United States. Obviously, quite a few modern spins on hoppier styles were developed here, but IPA has its roots in the UK. In addition to Cream Ale and California Common, rest in peace Anchor Brewing, that's a sad story, we've got Kentucky Common as well, a relatively young style of beer that has a pretty interesting history.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by beer history. Given our love for beer, it only seems to channel our love even further with digging into the history and the stories behind it. So this is fascinating to me.
Yeah, I feel like there's elements of beer history that, I mean, obviously they just kind of go along. They run parallel to the, especially with U.S. styles like this, or styles that were developed in our homeland here, Steve, that they just kind of parallel, American history. And that's interesting because we know that, there are no, I don't want to get political here, but there are no like true Americans, right? We've got Native Americans and then everybody who immigrated here from other lands. And that is exactly the case with how Kentucky Common was built. You had German and Irish immigrants who settled in the Louisville. I'm saying that right, am I, Steve? Louisville?
I believe that's how I pronounce it.
Yeah.
But, I don't want this to turn into a Seinfeld episode.
Yeah. So they settled in the Louisville, Kentucky area, and they wanted beer that reminded them of home. I mean, this is the story of so many, American styles. But given the new environment, they were forced to use the ingredients available to them at the time, which, is whatever, pale barley malt that they had, but largely corn, in the same way that Kentucky bourbon is often made with corn or corn whiskey. So the first documented mention of Kentucky Common was in 1902. So this is you can see that it's a fairly young style relative to other styles that have been around for centuries, indicating it was being brewed in the mid to late 19th century, at least, maybe even earlier than that. There's just no documented history on that. The idea behind Kentucky Common, and it kind of reminds me of a lot of British beers. You hear about porter, how it was made for the drinking class, for the working class people who are working down at the shipyard, and after work they could go and grab a nice porter or a mild. They wanted it to be notably quick, grain to glass, and they were turning these beers around in about 1 week, maybe, give or take a couple of days. The ingredients were really inexpensive. They were, again, quick turnaround time, so it made the beer cheap. And by cheap I mean low cost. It was like a third to half of the cost of other beers that were being sold at the time, and hence that's why it was popular among the kind of the labor class of citizens in the Louisville area. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think actually with the amount of breweries that are kind of struggling right now, maybe it's time to go back to simpler times, and just kind of really think about what is the most cost-effective way of brewing a beer, but then also marketing it so that it does sell, because that's the bottom line. That's what keeps these breweries afloat.
Yeah, I love that they went with the common, moniker as well. And my understanding is that was just the reason that people referred to things as whatever common was that it was for the common drinker,
Right.
So, Kentucky Common, you're going to find it everywhere in this area. Same with California Common. It was very popular in the San Francisco area. Obviously, I think we're open to calling it steam beer again now. I don't know how that's going to work out.
I don't know.
But,
I don't. When one of the guys posted that and was questioning that, I don't know. That's the debatable issue right now, right?
Yeah, we'll see. But back to Kentucky Common, you start to wonder, like, well, why did this style fizzle out? Was it because it sucked and it just wasn't that good? I don't think so. It was created just a couple of decades before Prohibition. And if you look at the history of Prohibition, my understanding is that the general Kentucky populace was actually largely on board with it. And, they viewed, booze as being evil in essence. And so that's one of the reasons this style just fizzled out. One, it was illegal to make it, and anybody who was making it was hiding it. Obviously, they couldn't sell it or anything. So you had a small number of brewers. I mean, people like you and me, Steve, who were keeping the style alive because they liked it, making it in their bathtubs, so to speak. And up until the last couple of decades or so, it just kind of wasn't a thing. And I think what kind of brought it back onto the scene was modern homebrewers. Our people, the people that we know, who are interested in the history of beer and particularly American styles. And, they're reading about this Kentucky Common saying, well, that sounds pretty good. Let's see what we can make it. And back in 2015, it was at least popular enough for the BJCP to add it into their guidelines, which I think is pretty cool. So you can actually compete with the Kentucky Common now and submit it under Kentucky Common. So still till this day, it's not very popular. I've never made one. I've had a few that I think are really good. But it would be cool to start seeing more styles like this kind of popping back up on the scene. Now, before we start digging into this style, the details of the style, I think it's important to point out that very little information exists about the perceptible characteristics of original Kentucky Common. As people who are experienced with brewing and beer, I think we can kind of presume how they tasted and smelled and such. What we do know is that it was rather quickly fermented in barrels. So again, quick turnaround time. And considering the era in which it was developed, many suspect it had some funky or sour notes from the presence of wild yeast and bacteria, though definitely not to the point of being an actual sour beer. Now, while this seems to have become widely accepted, when I first heard of Kentucky Common, I was told that it's a sour mash beer. There are some who disagree and view Kentucky Common as being basically a darker version of cream ale. This is the stance that the BJCP takes. It's a very solid stance. It is not a sour beer. And in fact, they comment, and I think we'll get into this later, but they comment that if you are souring your Kentucky Common and you're competing with it, you need to submit it under the sour category, not Kentucky Common. So I've had clean and some funkier samples. I'll tell a couple of stories about those as we go on. But just so you know, if you had it in your mind that Kentucky Common is supposed to have a little bit of acidity or a funky character to it, that is not the approach we're going to be taking in this episode necessarily, because the BJCP doesn't view it that way. And we're kind of basing this, at least this segment, on what the BJCP says. So what is the overall impression that the BJCP, how do they describe Kentucky Common, Steve?
Clean, dry, refreshing, slightly malty dark beer with high carbonation, mild tasting with light toast and caramel flavors, and served very fresh as a sessionable saloon beer, which I love that idea of a saloon beer. It kind of reminds me of old Westerns and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll take 4, please.
Yes,
that sounds perfect to me.
Sure.
I mean, that is like my style of beer. We're just going to run through some descriptive stuff here. As you can tell, this is a pretty simple thing. You can probably already envision how it looks, maybe even smells and tastes, just based on some basic stuff here. The appearance, it's going to be amber orange to brown, have good clarity, though slight haze is okay. You have to remember these beers were getting turned around in about a week. So a little bit of haze, whether that's chill haze and maybe even a little yeast or whatever it might be, is perfectly okay. The ones I've had have been crystal clear, which is pretty cool. Foam is going to be white to beige in color, and it may not have very good retention. I don't know why that is. I think from the high use of corn, and we'll get into that later, but it does have a relatively good charge of corn in it, and that may just impact the head retention. How is this beer supposed to smell?
Malt forward, low to medium grainy, corn-like, with sweet maltiness, with a low toast, biscuit grainy or caramel malts are accentuated, medium to moderately low hop aroma, usually floral or spicy, clean fermentation profile with a low berry ester that's appropriate. Low DMS is acceptable. And in big capital letters, no sourness, which I've never, going back to your experiences with tasting them, I've never had one that is even slightly tart. So that would be interesting to have.
I have a feeling that when the BJCP included Kentucky Common in the guidelines, that people started just following that in their brewing of it. I mean, one of the beautiful things, one of the many great things about the BJCP, in my opinion, is that, there's this style I've never tried. I want to do something new, something unique. You can go read the guidelines, go check out a couple of, and you have a basic idea of what it is, go check out a couple recipes online and then build your own. So I think, from starting in 2015, there was probably very few sour Kentucky Commons. I actually had my first experience before that. So, and those were the sour ones. We'll get into that in a bit. Flavor wise, you're looking to basically follow the aroma. The flavor's going to be balanced toward the malt. Obviously, it's a very low hop beer, moderate grainy sweet maltiness with low to medium low caramel, toffee, bready or biscuit notes, low grain or a corn-like sweetness. I don't ever get corn-like sweetness whenever I make beers with a high amount of flaked maize or any form of corn, but hey, if you get it, you get it. Medium to low floral or spicy hop flavor, medium to low bitterness with no harsh aftertaste. It can have a light fruitiness on the palate, but you don't want this thing to be an ester bomb. This is not an English ale, anyways. A little light mineral character from the higher sulfate water is appropriate as well. One thing to point out is that the water, at least as it's documented, what they were using back in the early 20th century in the Louisville area was pretty high carbonate and high sulfate levels. And so if you're trying to mimic the water profile of what they were originally making these beers with, you're probably gonna add some some gypsum to your water to bring up that sulfate. And I quite like that slight mineral characteristic I get in lighter beers that have higher sulfate water. That's a personal preference thing though. Again, flavor, no sourness. The BJCP says that soured versions, just a reminder, must be entered under the mixed fermentation sour beer category. That this is not supposed to be a sour beer. I know a lot of people couldn't care less about what the BJCP says on that and are probably still making, soured Kentucky Common. Mouthfeel wise, you could probably piece it together. You've got high corn, you've got low alcohol. It's going to be medium to medium light body. It's not going to be very rich. It's not going to be super creamy in your mouth, though it can have a slight creamy texture. This is a highly carbonated beer. When you think about high carbonation, to me at least, my mind goes to refreshing. And that is the whole point of this. You've been working all day. You want to go grab a couple of pints with the buds. You want to crush these things. And the higher the carbonation, the more crisp and refreshing it can be. I
would add one more thing about making this beer. When I've had it from Fall City Brewing Company, they added a touch of rye to theirs. Which really does kind of round things off a little bit. And I thought it was a wonderful addition. Whether or not that's traditional, I don't really think so. But, given my love for rye, it's a welcome addition.
Yeah. And if you are after that creamier mouthfeel, 20% rye, you're going to get that viscosity, from the beta glucans, and it really can amplify that nice. It makes a thinner, lighter beer feel more oomph,
right?
Right. I'm not sure of we've talked before about the flavor impact of rye. It's not spicy in my opinion whatsoever.
Mine too.
It's almost more earthy. Yeah.
Right.
And I love that. So,
yeah.
All right, let's break down the vital stats as provided again by the BJCP, which my understanding is that they're just basing this information off of historical recipes and such. So obviously, there are times even we, share recipes that fall a little bit outside some of these numbers, and that's perfectly fine. But the BJCP says that the Kentucky Common should start with a 1044 to 1055 OG and finish between 1010 and 1018 FG for an ABV range of between 4 and 5.5%. That is my sweet spot. I love that. IBU is between 15 and 30. My hunch, based on my experiences with these beers, is that most people are probably aiming for that 15 to 20 IBU range, but you do you. If you want a little bit more crisp bitterness, then do something like that. And SRM is exactly what we talked about earlier, 11 to 20. It's going to give you that amber orange to light brown color. And it just creates a beautiful beer. And I think that's a nice, grouping of stats there for a beer that is supposed to be refreshing and easy to drink.
For sure. I kind of think too, like, like ambers or even, just amber beers are similar in the SRM range, so that would be very enjoyable.
Yeah, and the thing is, you might be listening to this so far saying, well, it just kind of sounds like a low ABV amber ale. Yeah, it's different. Amber ale, in the beginning, when I first started drinking amber ale, was not hoppy. Nowadays, I think American amber is synonymous with, amber IPA in essence. So, they're really hoppy. They have a lot of American, more modern American hops. That is not the case with Kentucky Common. Where Kentucky, there are some very specific differences, and I think one of the big ones is in the malts used, or the grains really used to produce this beer. I mentioned it before. A substantial amount of corn is used in these, upwards of 40% I've seen in some recipes. Otherwise, they were sticking with six-row malt, pale six-row malt, back in the day, because that's what they had available to them. And pale six row is pretty hot. It does really well with conversion and such. So you could add all that corn and still get the conversion that you need from those corn sugars in the beer. So you're not finishing with a super low OG beer. I mean, it's pretty low anyways, but
right.
All the proper conversion is happening. It can also include some caramel malts, which we know it's going to get that color, as well as small amounts of black malt. I think the black malt was probably used, if you got this high carbonate water, I'm assuming that these brewers knew what was up and they were using some of that black malt for the acidification of the mash to bring it down a little bit, because higher carbonate water tends to have that higher pH. But it could have been for color correction. That may have been where the Kentucky Common kind of got that color from. Who knows? But most of the recipes I've seen online have those four things. All of them are going to have some sort of pale malt. Most of them are using two-row now, because that's what we have available to us. But then corn, some amount of caramel malt, and then a little bit of black malt. I think it's pretty money. No adjuncts in this one. Obviously, you're not going to be throwing fruits and stuff like that in this. But so pretty basic malt bill. How about the hops? What hops were people using back then and should probably use if they're making this beer nowadays?
For American hops, look towards cluster for your bittering, and then possibly a Saaz as your continental hop for the finishing, which can really kind of bring out that spiciness that you want.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking most of the recipes that I found when I was just going over, I looked at like 4 or 5 recipes online, and most of the Kentucky Common recipes I found rely either solely on old school American hops like cluster. I mean, that was a common one that I saw being used for this, or they're bittering with something American like cluster. And then, like you said, finishing with something from Europe, like a classic noble hop. But I started thinking, Tettnanger is one of my absolute favorite hops of all time. Certainly my favorite noble hop. I don't know if that would work really well in this style of beer. You're supposed to have light floral and spicy. And to me, Tettnanger is like overemphasizes that floral component. Almost a sweet floral thing is what I get from it. I think Saaz is almost perfect for this style. So again, do what you want to do. You could, but you're not going to be throwing, something like, Simcoe at this
right,
beer.
Exactly.
You can, of course, but that, to stick within the style guidelines, you're not going to be using Galaxy or Simcoe or Citra or anything like that. So, as far as yeast goes, this is an interesting area. You have to remember, this is a Kentucky Common. And when we think about, other styles like cream ale or California Common that are in the similar vein, we refer to those as hybrid styles of beer, meaning that they're either, fermented warm with a lager yeast, which, oh my gosh, that's committing the major sin, or they're fermented a little bit cooler with ale yeast. To me, do what you want to do. Just make sure that yeast is neutral. Make sure it's clean. I doubt that brewers back then, especially when they were developing Kentucky Common, were getting into big arguments over, what yeast to use and how to use it, as long as it was clean. So something like Imperial Yeast GO3 Dieter or AO7 Flagship would work well. You can also go with cleaner lager strains like LO5 Cable Car. That's their Imperial's Cow Common strain, or even something like L13 Global. That's the Weinstefan lager strain, which we've shown ferments incredibly clean, even at ale temperatures. So
I was even thinking maybe tartan would work really well here.
Sure.
More focused on the malts, very clean fermentation, not a whole lot of esters coming through. But I think it would be a really wonderful choice if you have it laying around.
Yeah, that's that Scottish ale strain. I believe it's from McEwen's Brewery is the original source, but it's a fantastic yeast strain. I've had really good luck with it in most styles. I've had some pretty shoddy luck with it in other styles, but that's for another episode. This is what it's funny when we talk about styles like Kentucky Common, where I feel like we borrowed all of these things, these brewing processes from Europe, and we tried to simplify it just so the workers could have something to drink. Not very complicated, right? You're not going to do much different with a Kentucky Common than you would with a cream ale or a pale ale or an IPA even. It's very easy. First place to start is your water chemistry. Again, Louisville had fairly hard water that was high in carbonates and sulfates. So if you're trying to emulate, the original versions of this, just kind of consider that. It's very easy to add a little gypsum, which is going to give you both calcium and sulfate. So you're going to increase the hardness. You're going to have that sulfate mineral character there. Darker malts, again, likely served to, at least part of the purpose to acidify that mash a little bit so that it was in that kind of ideal conversion range, pH range. The mash, you're looking at 60 minutes. These were supposed to be quick turnaround from start to finish. That was the whole idea. They didn't want to waste all their time doing a decoction. They didn't want to do these 5-hour boils. It was nothing like that. These were simple beers that were supposed to be turned around quickly, require very little energy on the part of the brewer so that they could charge less for the beer. So you're looking at about 60-minute mash around 148 to 154. That's 64 to 68 C. To emphasize that beta amylase, it creates more fermentable sugars to encourage that dryness and consequent drinkability. That's what we want. Now, here's the optional part that we're just going to hint on that goes completely outside of what the BJCP says. Some people prefer to perform somewhat of a brief sour mash by tossing some fresh grain on top of the mash and leaving it out overnight, which allows lactobacillus to create lactic acid. Sour mashes are an iffy thing. I've had some really great sour mash beers. In fact, Blue Owl out of, I think, Austin, Texas, that's their process, and they make fantastic sour mash beers. I've also had some sour mash beers made by homebrewers that I wouldn't want to serve to my friends. So that's just, do what you want to do there. It is not BJCP appropriate to make a Kentucky Common this way, but that is an option. You're going to boil for about 60 minutes to achieve the adequate isomerization of alpha acids so that beer is properly bitter. And, these, again, they were less concerned about DMS. And so they weren't doing these super long boils or anything to drive off SMM and DMS because the goal was a quick turnaround. Once that boil is complete, the wort is quickly chilled to ensure a good cold break. And then they're probably trying to avoid racking too much trub to the fermenter, which at the time were barrels. You got to remember that. So they're sending this relatively clear wort to barrels. Now, another optional thing, if you skipped the sour mash, but you still want a little tartness, is I've known people who kettle sour their Kentucky Commons. They're not doing it for very long, and they're not using super powerful, lactobacillus. These aren't supposed to be like, sour beer. It's supposed to have this hint of tartness is what I've heard from people. So you don't want to go nuts with this. But that is an option, again, outside of BJCP. If you're going to ferment one of these the traditional way, you should probably get a wood barrel because I believe that was the way that they did it back in the day. How cool to grab like a bourbon barrel and ferment a Kentucky Common in one of those. That could be really good.
It really could be.
Yeah. But these were fast turnaround beers. So they were going to be fermented warmer. These were not, lagered beers by any means. Anywhere from 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like 18 to 20 C. Maybe a touch lower if you're using lager yeast. So like I said, if you're using some of the more popular lager strains out there, they can create a perfectly clean, fermentation character fermented at ale temperatures. Finally, we talked about it earlier. These beers should be mostly clear at least, despite being served within a week or so of being brewed. So I'm sure there were some brewers back in the day that were tossing in some isinglass or whatever popular findings existed back then. I doubt they were using things like gelatin, but maybe, who knows? And I'm highly, suspicious of whether they were filtering their beer or not. I doubt that was the case, but they still tended to be pretty clear. So to me, whenever I use high portions of corn, those beers clear up very quickly. I don't know why, but they do. Maybe less protein or something.
Interesting.
Finally, yeah. It's weird. I mean, is that an experience that you've had or no?
I think I maybe brewed with corn maybe like once or twice. I need to get more experience with it to.
You're missing out, man.
I know. I have some that I'm just kind of sitting on right now. So I do need to get into that.
Yeah, cream ale is that's like top 10 favorite beer styles for me. It's so delicious.
Yeah.
And so anyways, again, high carbonation. You want 2.6 to 2.8, even more volumes of CO2 if you can get it in there. It's supposed to be crisp, refreshing, bubbly. So overall, what are we looking for, Steve, in a good example of Kentucky Common? How will you know, somebody says, hey, I made this Kentucky Common, sets it down in front of you. What do you expect if it's a good example of the style?
Definitely malt forward with a not overly malty or sweet, noticeable corn-like aroma and flavor is very appropriate, with minimal floral or spicy hops with a very clean fermentation.
Yeah, bingo. I mean, that nails it. You're not looking for a super hoppy beer, but just that nice balance with maybe leaning a little bit more into the malt, but it's not a malty sweet beer. It's just the hops are barely underbalancing that malt character, and you want to taste the malts without it being cloying or anything like that.
Right.
If you are going to go the sour route, if you're going to break the rules and go that sour route, it really should not be too tart. Just very subtle, kind of a nice acidity. You could probably achieve what you're looking for just by using lactic acid or maybe phosphoric acid.
It's an idea.
But that's not supposed to be there according to the BJCP. Again, we just want to kind of, respect those who do feel this historical style is supposed to have some level of acidity. It needs to be dry and super crushable. Now, here's what I think is funny. The BJCP lists a single notable commercial example in the guidelines, and that's Apocalypse Brewworks Ortels 1912. I've never even heard of Apocalypse Brewworks. I believe it is in Fall City, the Louisville area.
Okay.
I'm almost certain it is, in fact. I would love to try that beer. But it sounds like, you mentioned earlier, Steve, that you have tried a commercial example in the Louisville area. And my hunch is that they're probably one of the rare places where you might be able to find, a craft version of Kentucky Common on tap.
For sure. There is a list that I was just looking at earlier, actually, with about 8 or 10 different breweries in the United States. One in Minnesota, one in the Bronx, New York, called Gun Hill Brewing Company. A Signal Hill, California, has 10 Mile Brewing Company. One in upstate New York. And then another one in Massachusetts. So they're out there, but you really do have to spend some time looking for them. And then there's one in Ireland, of all places, that has it. So, it's even crossed the pond a little bit. So it's good to see.
Well, the easiest place to find Kentucky Common is in your own kegerator or your own fridge. You just got to brew it yourself. Again, this is not a very difficult style to make. I think if you're really trying to tap into historical styles like this, though, you might as well throw a batch together. It's probably going to be quite refreshing, especially if you're up in the northern hemisphere with us during the summertime. I mean, an easy one to drink. Like I said, I've only tried a handful of this style over the years, maybe 7 or 8 in total. All of them made by different home brewers, some clean while others were a touch sour. One thing they all had in common, though, was that beautiful copper color, clean malt, low hops. It's a classic style, and brewing one isn't that complicated, as we mentioned earlier, especially if you're going the clean route. You're probably going to be able to turn this beer around in a week like the original people who invented it were doing. And it's really not much different than any other beer. So what would happen if a bunch of corners were cut, though, in the brewing process? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about when we're back from this break. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Chilling wort can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Exchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brewlosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Exchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Exchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to Exchillerator.com today. The first time I ever heard of Kentucky Common, it's story time now, Steve, was all the way back in 2012, which considering, I had nearly 10 years of brewing under my belt at the time, suggests how unpopular this style was. Those first 10 years, I'd never even heard of this style. So I was at a local homebrew club meeting, and the host, an old buddy of mine, and a prior president of the club, in fact, told me that he was planning on making a Kentucky Common soon. When I asked what the hell that is, he explained that it's basically a sour mashed cream ale with some darker malts to give it color. And honestly, the darker malts part makes sense to me, but I was told back then that this is specifically a sour mashed beer. So a few weeks later, I asked him about it, and he said that he had to stop before he even boiled the wort because his wife made him dump the sour mash after a day of souring because of how bad it smelled in his garage. And if you've ever forgotten to clean your mash tun, after brewing, if you're not doing, the whole brew in a bag thing nowadays, it's pretty awful. I could understand why his wife was like, get that the hell out of here.
For sure.
I got to still use the garage.
I've heard it
Clearly,
before.
Yeah, it's so gross. Clearly, my friend took a particular approach to making his Kentucky Common, what with the sour mash and all. We were curious, though, to see how one would turn out made short and shoddy style, though trying to stick more closely to the BJCP description of this beer as being clean. And again, just a reminder, this was actually brewed by Brewlosophy's Mike Neville, who, congrats to him for his family growing, and that's why I haven't heard his voice in a while. But he made this one, I believe it was last year. So,
so Mike did a full 5-gallon batch, 19 liters, weighed out his grain the night prior, and his grain bill consisted of 37% pale 6-row malt, 37% pale 2-row malt, so a nice split there between the two. 21% of flaked maize or corn, as it is. 2.5% of black malt, and also 2.5% of crystal, which was a double roasted crystal. Malt. That
DRC, that Crystal DRC, is it's a Simpsons product that I'm relatively unfamiliar with, though I've heard good things about. Anyways, this sounds like a solid grain bill for a Kentucky Common. One thing to keep in mind, there's a lot of claims out there that you need to mill your grains right before you mash in so that you can preserve the freshness of those grains. He did it the night before, very shoddy of him. He did it the night before and left them sitting out in his garage. Steve, you and I have both done this as well. It works just fine. But again, in keeping with the short and the shoddy approach to this beer, that's what he did. He milled them early and then left them out. The next day, he came back, started his brew day at 1:32 by collecting the full volume of filtered water. I believe it was tap water that he used, just filtered it. And then he added unmeasured amounts of Campden to knock out any chlorine. That's a solid thing. I don't care if you're going short and shoddy or not. No one wants a chloramine dosed beer. It's nasty. But then he added some calcium chloride and Epsom salt, which Epsom is just magnesium sulfate, with the goal of targeting that higher sulfate level. Because he's making a Kentucky Common. It's supposed to have a little bit of that mineral character. So again, 1:32 p.m. is when he started brewing the following day.
Yeah, kind of just falling into place with the, keeping it simple, as the recipe indicates. And then also Mike's mineral content here. Just very simple, nothing too complicated.
Yep.
So then in terms of the recipe, when the water was to strike temperature, the grains were added and stirred to incorporate before checking to ensure that he was on target with his temperature. His mass temperature was at 151 Fahrenheit, 66 Celsius. The mass was left for 30 minutes, after which the grains were removed. The wort was then boiled for another 30 minutes, and a single addition of 17 grams of CTZ, otherwise known as Columbus, was started at the boil.
CTZ, that doesn't sound very traditional, man. That's not cluster.
It doesn't. Although I can understand why Mike was using that, because cluster is pretty hard to find these days, at least from my experience. I brewed a beer not too long ago with some homebrew friends of mine and in my club, and cluster was used, but it was just by, pure coincidence, I think, that we actually had it. So,
yeah. Another thing to keep in mind, CTZ, like you said, Columbus, Tomahawk, Zeus, that whole story is kind of a fun one. But CTZ is a higher alpha hop, so it packs more of a punch. And the fact that he's only boiling for 30 minutes means in order to get the bitterness that he wants, you can either use a whole bunch more of a lower alpha hop, or you can supplement with a higher alpha hop. And CTZ is kind of known, it's got some fruity characteristics.
For sure.
It is a bit more modern, but also it does have kind of a spicy thing that I get from it as well. And so in these lower amounts, and if you think about, he's tossing that in right at the start of the boil, so it's in the boil or the wort for half an hour, rather than adding a smaller amount at 60 minutes and then adding another small amount of something else at, say, 15 minutes or so, which I think is probably more traditional. A single CTZ, charge of CTZ at half an hour and then nothing else, probably a good way to get close to what you might get from going the other route. So not a bad decision for a short and shoddy batch.
Not at all. Not at all. So then after the boil was completed, Mike used his Jaded Hydra immersion chiller to get his wort chilled quickly. Refractometer reading showed the wort was at 1045 OG with a 64% brewhouse efficiency, which
impressive.
Not bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not bad
at all. When I'm doing these short and shoddy batches, I have found that there does seem to be a kind of a correlation between the lower the OG, the higher my brewhouse efficiency. And 1045, I would have probably designed the recipe and expected maybe 58 to 60%. So he's kind of like you are an epiphany to me, Steve, because you're all constantly nailing like 85% efficiency regardless of what you do. I'm down there in the 60% when I'm doing like low 60s, high 50s when I'm doing these short and shoddy batches. But the best I'll get is like 73%, on my system anyways. So 64%, that's almost normal in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, my unscientific reasoning for my efficiency is due to the grain crush and brew bag. Again, very unscientific. And I will say that to anybody who asks me about it. But yeah, it's kind of an anomaly, I guess.
Yeah.
But whatever, it's beer.
Well, so he got that 1045 OG smack online. I mean, that's a great OG. With that wort chilled, he racked it to a fermentation vessel, and then he pitched a single pouch of Imperial Yeast AO7 Flagship. That is the popular Chico strain made popular by Sierra Nevada, of course, and very clean, known to produce a really clean fermentation character. Now at this point, the time was 3:27, so he started at 1:32, ended at 3:27 for a total brew day time of just 1 hour and 55 minutes. Holy moly. Talk about quick turnaround. Yeah, talk about quick turnaround time. I mean, that's just gnarly.
For sure. I revel in those types of days when everything goes smoothly, right?
Yeah, they're hectic, but they end early. That's for sure.
Yes, definitely. So then the fermenter was placed in the basement, which maintains a consistent temperature of 62F, which is 17C. After 10 long days, no signs of fermentation were visible. So a hydrometer reading showed that the beer was at 1006, which is a final gravity reading, brought the beer to a 6.1 ABV, which is a touch higher than what the BJCP says, although I wouldn't complain about it too much.
Yeah,
it seems pretty spot on.
What do you make of that attenuation was pretty high? I mean, he got down to 1006. I would have expected this beer to maybe finish at 1010, 1011, but it got down to 1006, which is something that I've experienced with just how fresh, we're using really fresh yeast, and A07 is a beast. I mean, it goes to town. I was wondering maybe if it's that. Obviously, he mashed at 151 Fahrenheit. So it could be that was just a touch too low given the high amount of corn that was used, 21%. And again, the 6 row is gonna work to convert as much of that, those starches into fermentable sugars. Right. So it may have been that as well. Regardless, 6.1% is perfectly fine by me in my personal Kentucky Common guidelines. I'll drink it.
For
no
sure.
problems on that. Yeah.
Definitely. And then Mike cold crashed it to 38F, which is 3C, under pressure overnight, then pressure transferred the beer to a CO2 purged keg, where he didn't add any findings to it. Then he burst carbonated overnight before gas was reduced to serving pressure. After another week of cold crashing, it was ready for evaluation.
So, in thinking about the traditional way Kentucky Common was made, that it was fermented and, people were basically grain to glass. People were drinking it 10 days, a week to 10 days, after it was brewed. This one went a little bit longer. I think a part of it is that we're serving it to tasters and asking them to evaluate it. Sometimes that we can't just do that, while we're working and doing our other normal life stuff. So he had to wait to serve this to tasters. But still, he's within about 2 weeks of brew day when he was serving this to people. So we're going to go through some of the data here. First off, the way this beer looks. To me, it looks mostly clear in the picture. It's got a gorgeous amber orange color, one of my favorite beer colors of all time, in fact. But it looks almost clear, and that maybe the condensation on the glass was kind of making it look slightly hazy. But I believe Mike told me that it did have some haze to it, but it was very, very faint. The head was a just nice light beige kind of tannish color, but mostly white. It looks like a perfect example of the way the BJCP describes Kentucky Common to my eyes.
Yeah. I actually, if I'm remembering this correctly, this is a while ago, but I do believe Mike sent me this beer in a can, because doesn't Mike can his beers?
Yeah, he does.
Okay. He did send me this. This was a wonderful example of his beer. So I will give Mike props for that.
Yeah. And just to note, Steve was unaware that it was a short and shoddy batch at the time.
Exactly.
But yeah, very. To me, to my eyes, the beer looks absolutely gorgeous. He did serve this to 19 tasters for evaluation, and I believe this was as we were kind of coming out of the COVID thing, and so finding 19 tasters at the time was still pretty difficult. So I'm glad he was able to get that many people to evaluate the beer. Now, when we serve if short and shoddy, or when we give the short and shoddy survey to tasters to evaluate the beer, we tell them, well, not only what the style is, but we actually provide the BJCP style description as well, because we want them to evaluate the beer with an anchor on what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to taste like. So the average characteristic rating in terms of how hoppy, malty, and dry the beer was, tasters rated the strongest characteristic as being its maltiness, which makes sense to me. It yielded an average of about 3.2 out of 5. Tasters rated the dryness as about a 3.1 out of 5, while the hoppy character was the lowest rated at 1.2 out of 5. That all fits perfectly with what I would expect for Kentucky Common. What do you think, Steve?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it does seem like it's pretty much spot on there.
Yeah, exactly. And that breakdown just sounds right on. So after rating the general characteristics, just to see what they find being the most prominent in the beer, we then have tasters break down what the actual specific characteristics they get from each the hop, malt, and yeast character. So for the hop character, 14 out of 19 tasters noted it as having an earthy hop characteristic, which I guess kind of makes sense. I think sometimes when it's a low hop beer, we're just kind of, pulling from what we think might be there, but we really might be rating something that we're perceiving from the malt or whatever. 2 people noted it as being pine or resinous, and then 1 each noted spicy, berry, and onion, garlic. Nobody endorsed fruity, floral, melon, or dank caddy. It was so low anyways. I mean, you have to remember the overall hoppiness was rated as a 1.2 out of 5. So it's not really there. This kind of makes sense to me.
It does. It does. I mean, the onion garlic, I mean, there's only one person that put that down. Maybe, I don't know, they ate a, onion-filled smash burger beforehand. I don't know. But, it's all relative.
CTZ is kind of known, if it gets a little long on the vine, it can impart some onion, but I doubt it was there. I think sometimes, again, we're kind of picking. We're like, right. Oh, what is there? I don't get much hop character at all, but what can I kind of, distill out of this? In terms of malt character, 7 out of 19 people noted it as being toasty, which I love that. Yummy yum. 5 people said cracker bread crust. 3 people said caramel sweet, and 2 each endorsed nutty and roast. Nobody endorsed chocolate. Again, this lines up exactly with what I would expect for a Kentucky Common.
Exactly. I mean, everything is in unison with each other. Nothing, really stands out. I kind of go back to, people who have this ability to detect off flavors, a little bit more vividly than, say, myself, and maybe that they were able to pick out the toasty notes, and then while someone else was like, "Oh, this is," I pick out the cracker notes. So it kind of a nice variety of what Mike actually used in this beer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this goes along with that as well. 13 out of 19 tasters rated the fermentation character as being clean. I mean, that's the vast majority of tasters. 3 detected some ester characteristics. 2 noted sulfur, 1 said phenolic, and nobody endorsed wild, which I do think is kind of funny because so many people think, there's a good chunk of people out there who think that this is supposed to be kind of a wild, wild yeast / bacteria, tainted beer. Nobody got that. I mean, the majority thought it was clean fermentation character. So again, spot on. That sounds like a freaking fantastic beer to me. And nobody noted any off flavors in the beer as well. So that's pretty rad.
Exactly. And then the representation of style, as the BJCP description says, 5 out of 19 rated this a 5 out of 5, while 9 rated it a 4 out of 5. 4 thought it was a 3 out of 5, and then 1 gave it a 2 out of 5, and nobody rated it 1 or 0 out of 5.
If I'm making a beer based on a BJCP style description, because that's what we're asking people. Again, they're anchoring their rating to what we provide to them from the BJCP. Anything for a 3 out of 5 or higher, I'm saying is pretty spot on.
Yeah.
The fact that 18 out of 19 people gave it a 3 out of 5 or more, with the majority of them rating it a 4 out of 5 or higher, I would say that he nailed it. At least reading the BJCP style guideline and then drinking this beer, which is what you do when you're judging a competition, it seemed to fit. And I think that's pretty awesome. It sounds like it was, pretty close to what the BJCP would expect. Now, that doesn't speak to how people, if they liked this beer or not, what they actually thought of this beer on a more subjective level. So we ask them, what did you think of this beer? Rate your, preference on a scale of 0 to 5. 6 out of 19 people gave it a 5 out of 5. I have a feeling, I did not try this beer. I have a feeling I would have rated it a 5 out of 5 just because I love the way this beer sounds and the simplicity of it, that high corn thing. Another 11, so 17 total, but 11 people rated it a 4 out of 5, and then 1 each rated it a 3 and a 2 out of 5. Nobody gave it a 1 or a 0 out of 5. it's only, human nature that people are going to like different things, in different ways. So the fact not everybody absolutely loved, Mike's Kentucky Common isn't surprising. But man, 17 out of 19 people gave it a 4 out of 5. That's pretty rad.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. And if, like I said before, if memory serves me correctly, I did try this beer and I was impressed. So I definitely give Mike some credit for this.
Yeah, it sounds awesome to me. The majority of tasters not only felt it was a good representation of what the BJCP describes as a Kentucky Common, which is awesome, but they also seem to enjoy drinking it as well, which just indicates that Mike pretty much hit all the marks, at least for a clean version of the style. And when you consider the fact that it was brewed using these short and shoddy methods that, 20 years ago would have been poo-pooed, to the gutter, basically, there was no off flavors. Again, no off flavors noted by evaluators. We did not have this tested in a lab. Not only were there no off flavors, all of his numbers were good. I mean, he got higher ABV than expected.
Right.
People seem to like it, and they also seem to think that it was a good representation of the style. I'm calling that a success. If you want to brew a Kentucky Common and you don't want to waste a bunch of time brewing it, consider trying this out. I think you're probably going to have equal success as Mike did. Now, we got a couple of reader comments I thought we would get to real quick. The first one comes from David W., who says, "Hell yeah, I'm so glad you did this one. I discovered this style a few months ago, and my brew club had it for our monthly meeting beer style. A bunch of people brewed it, and all of them were amazing. The one I made was gone in 2 weeks because all of my friends drank what had to be like 3 gallons in one night. It tasted like a maltier and hoppier version of Shinerbach," which, Steve, have you had Shinerbach?
Yeah, definitely. When I visit my in-laws out in Texas, we usually will get Shinerbach.
Oh, yeah. And that, to be honest, when I drink Shinerbach or when I hear Kentucky Common and I read descriptions of it, Shinerbach is kind of what I expect. I mean, it's that kind of corny, basic, it looks darker than it tastes, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So yeah, David, I'm glad Mike hit this one as well. And I hope more people brew Kentucky Common. Paul Toller said, this is from Facebook. He said, "I brew one of these every year. The bottle cap is an American flag. It's a style that's original to the USA. Grain bill is intended to deal with Great Plains problems. There was too much hardness of the water. The hops are American and noble German hops. This is just a great American style," Paul says.
I keep on going back to this idea of the sour thing with this style, because that's what I always think about when I talk about or hear people talking about Kentucky Commons. I wonder if it's a product of the old adage of you can take the boy or girl out of Louisville, but you can't take the Louisville out of the boy or girl. Grandpappy, did, moonshine or distilled whiskey back in his day, and damn it, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to make beer because I'm going to make my own path. I really wonder if it's, a product of their environment and product of like what they know back then, when this style was first, introduced and thought of back in the early years. So I don't know. I keep on going back to that, and I wonder, if it's something that's what they knew and that's what they did. So
well. The one thing that I know for certain, and I will say this with confidence, is that nobody living today drank Kentucky Common back in 1902. So there's really very little that we know about how these beers were, because it was a laborer's drink. It's not like these guys were working. They were getting off the job, the laboring job, and going to have a refreshing pint after work. They weren't sitting and journaling their thoughts on it or anything.
Exactly.
So who knows about that? But I do appreciate what Paul's saying, that it was this is the case for so many. You think about Pilsner in Pilsen, Czech Republic. It was in many ways a function of what was available to them. Same with stout, in Ireland, that hard water, and so the use of those black malts, those really dark roasted malts, had a function. And I think that may very well be the case here with Kentucky Common. So, final comment comes from Brian Sprague. You're going to appreciate this one, Steve. He left a comment for us on Facebook. He said about 10 to 12% rye really adds something nice to Kentucky Common too. I know you agree with that.
I do. I have to keep the spruce tips at bay here, but the rye is definitely right up my alley as well. So right on. I love that addition.
I'm telling you, if I was thinking about, they're coming out with some really unique, obviously in the era in which we're brewing these days, we've got so many ingredient options, and I've seen some different roast level, rye malts. You think about getting your color from like a caramel rye or something like that in this beer. Oh my God, it would be so good. And it may not be spot on with the way that they were doing it a long time ago, but you know what? Call it a Kentucky Common anyways. It's going to be great. And honestly, all you're doing is putting your spin on it. And I think rye sounds phenomenal in this. Maybe even a touch of honey malt in there. Ooh, that sounds so good to me.
Yep. For sure.
Well, I think that about covers Kentucky Common. Steve, is there anything else before we wrap up that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I was kind of thinking about the past episodes of podcasts that we've done, and you were talking to Will about the survey and kind of the state of homebrewing where we're at right now. And this is a perfect example of a style that you can't really find locally anywhere, commercially, I should say. Brew it yourself, do it and just enjoy it, because it's a really good style. And it is something that I think will be lost if we don't, as home brewers, brew it ourselves.
Yeah. No, I that's one of the things I love about the fact that the BJCP included it in the guidelines, is that it does it for posterity. If people aren't brewing it, at least people in the future can come back and look at the BJCP and say, well, this is kind of how, it's supposed to taste, the ingredients that were originally used. And yeah, that's where homebrewing is important. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but we love this. We love the gestalt of homebrewing, not just the beer itself. And I think
for sure,
Kentucky Common is one of those really cool styles that can keep interest alive as well. So brew it up.
Well, I mean, even going back further with this idea, maybe even, Gordon Strong's BJCP guidelines, one day become this sort of like historical, book of sorts that, will allow us to kind of look back at history of beer and kind of see what, the importance of it.
Yeah, I think it's really neat. Well, that is all the time that we've got. Right? Remember to subscribe to the Brew Lab podcast, where host Kay Job takes you into the lab with brewing experts so that you're notified when new episodes drop. Make sure that you subscribe to the Brewlosophy Show over on youtube.com. And don't forget that you can click the link in the description of this episode to read all about this short and shoddy Kentucky Common. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it soothes my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through